The subway doors slid open with their usual screech, and Claire stepped onto the platform at Union Square. It was just after 6 in the evening, and the Tuesday crowd pushed past her in waves. She clutched her laptop bag closer and moved with the flow of people heading toward the stairs. 3 years in New York City, and she still wasn't completely used to the constant motion, the endless stream of strangers brushing past without a glance. But that was exactly what she needed. To be invisible, to be just another face in the crowd. Claire had built her new life carefully, piece by piece. She worked from home as a graphic designer, using a different name than the one she was born with. She didn't post pictures online. She didn't go to the same coffee shop every day. She never talked about where she came from. These weren't quirks or preferences. They were survival tactics. Because 3 years ago she had run away from Phoenix with nothing but a duffel bag and the clothes on her back. She had left behind her apartment, her friends, and a marriage that had nearly destroyed her. Her ex-husband wasn't just controlling or angry. He was dangerous in ways most people couldn't imagine. Blake had been a police officer with friends in high places. When Claire had tried to get help, she learned quickly that having a badge meant people believed him, not her. So she had done the only thing she could do. She disappeared. The evening air was cool as she climbed the subway stairs, already thinking about the leftovers waiting in her small apartment. She would heat up some pasta, maybe watch something mindless on television, and then work on the logo design that was due Friday. It was a quiet life, maybe even a boring one, but it was hers, and it was safe. At least it had been safe until that moment. Claire was halfway across the platform when something made her turn her head. Later, she wouldn't be able to explain what it was. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way every nerve in her body suddenly screamed that something was wrong. But she turned, and her eyes swept across the crowd of commuters rushing in every direction. And that's when she saw him. Officer Wilson was standing on the opposite platform, perfectly still. Everyone around him was moving, hurrying to catch trains or climbing stairs, but he just stood there. His arms were crossed and he was looking directly at her. Not glancing, not accidentally making eye contact with a stranger. Looking at her with the kind of focus that made her stomach drop. Wilson had been Blake's partner for 6 years. They had worked together, went to barbecues together, and their wives had been friends before everything fell apart. Claire had sat across from Wilson at dinner parties, had laughed at his jokes, had trusted him because Blake trusted him. Now his face was blank, emotionless, but his eyes never left hers. For one frozen second, they stared at each other across the subway platform. The noise of the station seemed to fade away. Claire felt her heart hammering in her chest so hard she thought it might burst. Her hands went cold. Her mind was racing, trying to process what this meant. They found me. After 3 years of being so careful, of changing everything about her life, somehow they had found her. Wilson's expression didn't change. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't move at all. He just watched her with that cop stare that she remembered too well from her old life. The stare that said he was cataloging everything about her. What she was wearing. Which direction she had come from. Where she might be going, Claire didn't think. She just moved. She spun around and plunged into the crowd, pushing past people with mumbled apologies. Her laptop bag bounced against her hip as she ran. She heard someone curse as she bumped into them, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The stairs leading up to street level were right ahead, and she took them 2 at a time, her breath coming in short gasps. Her mind was screaming at her. How did he find her? How long had he been watching? Was he alone? The last question made her run faster. She burst out onto the street and the evening air hit her face. People on the sidewalk turned to stare as she stumbled to a stop, looking around wildly. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, and the streets were full of people heading home from work or out for the evening. Everything looked normal, safe, but Claire knew better. She forced herself to walk, not run. Running drew attention, and attention was the last thing she needed. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and turned off the location services, something she did automatically, but her fear made her double-check. Her apartment was 15 blocks north, but she couldn't go there. Not now. Not if they knew where she was. She walked quickly, turning corners at random, checking reflections in store windows to see if anyone was following her. Every person in a dark jacket made her pulse spike. Every car that slowed down made her want to run again. After 20 minutes of zigzagging through the city, Claire ducked into a small diner she had never been to before. It was half empty, with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of old coffee in the air. She slid into a booth in the back corner where she could see the door and tried to catch her breath. Her hands were still shaking. This couldn't be a coincidence. Wilson lived in Phoenix. What was he doing in New York? The rational part of her brain tried to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe he was visiting family. Maybe he was on vacation. Maybe it was all just terrible luck. But Claire had learned the hard way not to believe in coincidences. Not when it came to Blake. Blake had always been methodical, patient. When he wanted something, he planned carefully and waited for the right moment. That's what had made him so good at his job, and so dangerous when he turned that focus on her. If Wilson was here, if he had seen her, it wasn't by accident, which meant Blake knew where she was. The thought made her feel sick. She had been so careful. She had done everything right. She never talked to anyone from her old life. She didn't use social media. She paid for everything in cash when she could. She had even changed the way she dressed, the way she styled her hair, but somehow it hadn't been enough. A waitress came over looking tired. Claire ordered coffee she didn't want, just to have a reason to stay. As the woman walked away, Claire stared at her reflection in the dark window beside her booth. She looked scared. She looked exactly like the woman she had been 3 years ago, the one who had jumped at every sound and flinched at sudden movements. She had promised herself she would never be that woman again. But now, sitting in this unfamiliar diner as the sky grew dark outside, Claire faced a terrifying truth. If they had found her once, they could find her again. And if Wilson was in New York, he wasn't here alone. Blake would have sent others. Maybe they had been watching her for days or weeks, learning her routine, waiting for the right moment. The question was, what did they want? Blake wasn't the type to just show up and cause a scene. He was too smart for that, too aware of how things looked, which meant this was part of something bigger. A plan. And Claire had no idea what that plan was. She pulled out her phone again, staring at the screen. There was one person she could call. One person who might be able to help. But making that call would mean admitting she couldn't do this alone anymore. It would mean asking for help, something she had sworn she would never do again. Claire looked up at the diner's door, half expecting to see Wilson walking through it. But the street outside remained empty, just strangers passing by on their way to somewhere else. She took a deep breath and made the decision. She wasn't alone anymore. Whether she liked it or not, they had found her, and now she had to figure out what to do about it. Claire didn't go home that night. Instead, she walked to a cheap motel on the edge of Brooklyn, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. She lay awake in the dark, listening to every sound in the hallway, every car that passed outside. Sleep didn't come until the sun started rising, and even then it was restless and full of nightmares. By the next morning, she had made a decision. She wouldn't run again, not yet. Running meant giving up everything she had built here. Her clients, her tiny apartment, the life she had worked so hard to create. Instead, she would be smarter. She would watch and wait and figure out exactly what she was dealing with. But over the next week, Claire realized she wasn't the only one watching. It started small. On Wednesday morning, she went to the coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment, a place she visited maybe once a month. As she waited for her order, she noticed a woman sitting in the corner. Gray jacket, dark hair pulled back, sunglasses even though they were inside. The woman had a newspaper open, but she wasn't reading it. She was watching Claire in the reflection of the window beside her. Claire grabbed her coffee and left quickly, her heart racing. She told herself she was being paranoid. The woman was probably just someone who liked to people watch. But when she glanced back from half a block away, the woman was gone. The newspaper was still on the table and her coffee cup was still full. On Thursday, Claire noticed a man across the street from her building. He was wearing a baseball cap and looking at his phone, but he had been standing in the same spot for at least 20 minutes. She watched him from her window and he didn't move until a car pulled up. He got in, and they drove away slowly, the driver looking up at her building as they passed. Friday brought a dark blue sedan that parked on her block in the morning and was still there when she came back from the grocery store that afternoon. Different person behind the wheel, but the same car. She walked past it on her way home and tried to memorize the license plate. Her hands were shaking so badly that she had to write it down 3 times before she got all the numbers right. By Sunday, Claire had filled an entire notebook. Times, descriptions, license plates, locations. The woman in the gray jacket appeared twice more, always at places Claire went irregularly, never at the same time. The baseball cap man she saw once near the subway station. 3 different cars that seemed to show up too often to be coincidence. And always, the feeling of being watched, of eyes following her wherever she went. They weren't trying to hide anymore. That was the part that scared her most. They wanted her to know they were there. It was psychological warfare, and Blake had always been good at that. He knew how to get inside someone's head, how to make them feel hunted and helpless. Claire had spent 3 years learning to feel safe again, and now he was stripping that away piece by piece. On Monday morning, she made the call she had promised herself she would never make. The number was hidden in an old address book she kept in the bottom of her closet, written in code that only she would understand. It had been 3 years since she had spoken to Catherine Lynch, the lawyer who had helped her get the first protective order against Blake. Catherine had been the only person who truly understood what Claire was running from, who knew how dangerous Blake really was and how deep his connections went. When Claire had disappeared, she hadn't said goodbye. She had just vanished, because that was the only way to stay safe. She had always wondered if Catherine had been angry about that or worried, or if she had simply moved on to other clients and other cases. Claire used a payphone near the library, standing in the cold with her hood up and her hands shaking. She dialed the number and waited, half hoping no one would answer. "Lynch and Associates, this is Catherine speaking." The voice was the same, calm and professional. Claire's throat tightened. "It's me," she said quietly. "It's Claire." There was a long pause. Then Catherine's voice came back, softer now and filled with something that sounded like relief. "Thank God. Are you safe?" "Where are you?" "New York, but Catherine, they found me. I saw Wilson in the subway station last week, and now there are people watching me everywhere I go." "Are you at home right now?" "No, I'm at a payphone." "Good, don't go home." "Do you understand me?" "Don't go back to your apartment." The urgency in Catherine's voice made Claire's stomach drop. "What's going on? Why are they doing this?" "Listen to me carefully," Catherine said. "There's a shelter I work with in Queens. It's safe and they know how to handle situations like this. I'm going to give you the address and I need you to go there right now. We need to figure out who's watching you and why they're not just approaching you directly." "What do you mean?" "If Blake just wanted to talk to you or even to scare you, he would have done it by now. The fact that they're following you but not making contact means they're waiting for something. Either they want to see where you go, or they're looking for something they think you have." Claire's mind raced back through the last 3 years, trying to think of what Blake could possibly want from her. She had left with nothing. No money, no documents, just clothes and a few random belongings she had grabbed in her rush to leave. "I don't have anything of his," Claire said. "I made sure of that. We'll figure it out. But right now, I need you to get somewhere safe. Can you do that?" Claire wrote down the address on a scrap of paper, thanked Catherine, and hung up. She stood there for a moment in the cold, watching people walk past on their way to wherever they were going. Normal people living normal lives, not looking over their shoulders or sleeping in cheap motels or documenting surveillance in notebooks. She wanted that life back, but first she had to survive this one. The shelter was in a quiet neighborhood in Queens, tucked between a laundromat and a small grocery store. From the outside, it looked like any other building, which Claire supposed was the point. She rang the bell and was buzzed in immediately, like they had been expecting her. The woman who met her at the door was older, with kind eyes and gray hair. She didn't ask for Claire's name or her story. She just showed her to a small room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. "You're safe here," the woman said simply. "No one knows about this place except the people who need to." Claire wanted to believe her. But she had thought she was safe in New York too, and look how that had turned out. That night, Catherine called her on a phone the shelter provided. "I did some digging," she said, and her voice was tight with worry. "Claire, Blake got promoted twice. He's heading up some kind of special task force now." "What kind of task force?" "I don't know exactly. The details are vague, but here's the thing that really worries me. Wilson? He transferred to New York City 6 months ago. 6 months. Wilson had been in New York for 6 months. which meant Blake had known where she was for at least that long. "Maybe longer, why wait?" Claire asked. "If he knew where I was 6 months ago, why wait until now to let me see them?" "That's what we need to figure out," Catherine said. "But Claire, you need to prepare yourself. Whatever Blake wants, he's been planning this for a long time, and people like him don't make plans unless they're sure they're going to win." After Catherine hung up, Claire sat on the edge of the bed in her small room and stared at the wall. She thought about Blake and his careful plans, his patient way of waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She thought about Wilson standing on that subway platform, watching her with those cold cop eyes. And she thought about the question Catherine had asked. What was Blake waiting for? Claire pulled out her notebook and started going through everything she had written down. Every sighting, every car, every person who had been watching her. She was looking for a pattern, some clue that would tell her what they wanted. It was close to midnight when something occurred to her. Something she hadn't thought about in 3 years because she had been so focused on running and hiding and surviving. The last night she had been in Phoenix, when she had packed that duffel bag in a panic and run, she had grabbed things without really looking at them. Clothes, toiletries, a few photos, and a small box of random items from Blake's home office that she had thought contained her personal papers. She had never opened that box. She had been too afraid, too traumatized by everything that had happened. She had thrown it in a storage unit along with the other pieces of her old life that she couldn't bear to look at. Claire's blood ran cold as the realization hit her. The storage unit was still under her old name, the name Blake would be looking for. And if there was something in that box that Blake wanted back, he would never stop looking for it. Claire spent 2 weeks moving between safe houses that Catherine had arranged through her network. She never stayed in the same place more than 3 nights. She learned to check reflections in windows before turning corners. She varied her routes and never fell into a pattern. She became hyper-aware of everything around her, every person, every car, every sound. But the surveillance never stopped. It was always there, just visible enough to remind her they were watching. A familiar face in a crowd, a car that appeared too many times, someone who seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Catherine said it was intimidation. Blake wanted her to know she couldn't hide, that no matter where she went or what she did, he could reach her. It was working. Claire barely slept. She jumped at sudden noises. The constant fear was exhausting, and she knew that was part of his plan too. Wear her down until she made a mistake. On a cold afternoon in late October, Claire found herself in a small bodega in Queens, buying a sandwich and coffee. She had been staying in an apartment above a dry cleaner for the past 2 days, and this was the first time she had ventured out. The woman behind the counter barely looked at her as she rang up the purchase, but someone else was looking. Claire felt it immediately, that prickling sensation on the back of her neck that meant someone was watching her. She turned slowly, pretending to look at the shelves, and saw a woman near the refrigerators at the back of the store. She was tall with dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wearing jeans and a gray jacket, but it was the way she stood that caught Claire's attention. Alert, focused, like someone trained to observe. Their eyes met for just a second, and Claire saw something in the woman's expression that was different from all the others who had been following her. There was no threat there, no cold calculation. If anything, the woman looked concerned. Claire grabbed her items and left quickly, walking down the street with her head down. She checked behind her twice and saw the woman following, staying about half a block back. Claire's pulse quickened. She took a random turn down a side street, then another, trying to lose her. But then something strange happened. One of Blake's surveillance team appeared ahead of her. The man in the baseball cap she had seen before. He was walking directly toward her, and there was nowhere for Claire to go without being obvious. Her heart hammered as she tried to figure out what to do. Then the woman from the bodega moved past Claire in a rush as if she hadn't seen her. She collided with the baseball cap man, stumbling and grabbing his arm to steady herself. They both went sideways into a newspaper stand and papers scattered everywhere. "I'm so sorry," the woman was saying loudly, helping him pick up the papers. "I wasn't watching where I was going." The man was trying to look past her, trying to find Claire, but the woman kept moving in his line of sight, apologizing and making a scene. It gave Claire just enough time to slip into a corner store and out the back entrance into an alley. She ran until her lungs burned, not stopping until she was 6 blocks away. Back at the safe house, Claire tried to make sense of what had happened. The woman had deliberately interfered with Blake's surveillance. She had created a distraction to help Claire escape. But why? Who was she? Catherine didn't have answers when Claire called her. "I don't know who that could be," she said, worry clear in her voice. "But Claire, you need to be careful. This could be a new tactic. Someone trying to gain your trust." Claire knew Catherine was right to be suspicious, but something about the woman had felt different, genuine. 2 days later, she got her answer. Catherine called early in the morning, her voice tight with urgency. "Claire, you have an encrypted message. Someone sent it through my secure legal channel. They know you're in contact with me." "What does it say?" Catherine read it slowly. "It says Red Door Cafe on Amsterdam Avenue. 2:00 this afternoon. Come alone. I'm trying to help you. Agent Rita Coleman." "Agent? You mean like FBI?" "That's what it sounds like. But Claire, this could be a trap. Blake could have set this up." "An FBI agent wouldn't use your secure channel," Claire said, thinking it through. "That's for lawyers and clients. If Blake set this up, he would use official channels or just grab me on the street. He wouldn't go through this much trouble. I still don't like it." "I'm going," Claire said. The words surprised her as much as they surprised Catherine. But she meant them. She was tired of running and hiding, tired of being hunted. If this agent was real and could help her, she had to take the chance. And if it was a trap, at least she would finally know what Blake wanted. "Then I'm coming with you," Catherine said firmly. "No." She said, "Come alone. If I show up with you and she's real, she might leave. I have to do this myself." Catherine argued for another 10 minutes, but Claire had made up her mind. They agreed on a compromise. Catherine would be nearby, watching from across the street. If anything went wrong, she would call the police. The cafe with the red door was small and crowded, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner on Amsterdam Avenue. Claire arrived 10 minutes early and stood across the street, watching. She looked for surveillance, for Blake's people, for any sign that this was a setup. But everything looked normal. Just people going about their day, unaware of the drama playing out around them. At exactly 2:00, Claire crossed the street and went inside. The woman from the bodega was sitting in a corner booth wearing the same gray jacket. She looked up as Claire entered, and there was relief in her eyes. She gestured to the seat across from her. Claire sat down slowly, her body tense and ready to run. Up close, she could see that the woman was probably in her early 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. And there, just visible when she shifted in her seat, was a badge clipped to her belt. "My name is Agent Rita Coleman," the woman said quietly. "I'm with the FBI. I know you have no reason to trust me, and I know you're scared. But Claire, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Claire's hands were clenched in her lap. "How do you know my name?" "I've been investigating your ex-husband's task force for 8 months, Rita said. "I know what he did to you. I know why you ran. And I know why he's been looking for you." "You're investigating Blake?" Rita nodded. "His whole operation. Claire, your ex-husband isn't just a dirty cop. He's been running a corruption network that goes deeper than you can imagine. Falsified arrests, planted evidence, taking money from criminal organizations to look the other way. He's been doing it for years." Claire felt dizzy. She had known Blake was dangerous, that he abused his power. But this was something else entirely. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when you left 3 years ago, you took something with you. Something Blake has been desperate to get back. The storage unit. The box from his office." Claire's mouth went dry. "What was in that box?" "I don't know exactly," Rita admitted. "But based on my investigation, I believe it contains evidence of his crimes. Financial records, maybe. Or communications with his criminal contacts. Something that could bring down his entire network." "I didn't know," Claire whispered. "I just grabbed things when I was packing. I didn't even look inside. Blake figured that out eventually. That's why he's been tracking you. He needs to get that evidence back, but he can't do it officially, because it would raise too many questions. So he's been trying to scare you, hoping you'll lead him to wherever you're hiding it, or that he can catch you alone and make you tell him." Claire thought about the surveillance, the constant pressure, the feeling of being hunted. It all made horrible sense. "Here's the thing," Rita continued, leaning forward. "If we can get that evidence, if we can see what's in that box, we have a chance to stop him. Not just to get him away from you, but to put him in prison where he belongs, along with everyone else involved in his operation. You want me to help you?" I need your help. And Claire, you need mine. Because Blake isn't going to stop. He's going to keep coming until he gets what he wants. The only way you're ever going to be free of him is if we take him down. Claire looked at this woman, this stranger who claimed she could end the nightmare that had consumed the last 3 years of her life. Every instinct she had learned about survival was screaming at her to walk away, to keep running, to never trust anyone who promised to help. But Rita was right about one thing. Running hadn't worked. Hiding hadn't worked. Blake had still found her. What do you need me to do? Claire asked. Rita pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. Inside were photographs of crime scenes, document pages with sections blacked out, bank statements with highlighted numbers. First, I need you to understand exactly what you're dealing with. This isn't just about you and Blake anymore. There are other victims, people whose lives he destroyed, cases he manufactured, criminals he let walk free because they paid him. Claire looked at the photos and felt sick. She thought about all the times Blake had come home late, all the times he had been on his phone in the other room having quiet conversations. She had thought he was cheating on her. The truth was so much worse. Second, Rita continued, I need you to trust me enough to work together. I know that's asking a lot. But Claire, I've been building this case for months and I'm close, so close. But without that evidence, I might not have enough to make charges stick. Blake has protected himself well. He's covered his tracks. The storage unit is under my old name, Claire said. If I go there, he'll know. He's probably been watching it. I know. That's why we need a plan. A good one. Rita closed the folder and looked directly at Claire. I won't lie to you. This is going to be dangerous. Blake is smart and he's got resources. But I have something he doesn't. What's that? I have the law on my side. And if you help me, I'll make sure you're protected. Not just now, but after this is over. You'll finally be free of him. Claire sat back in the booth, her mind racing. This was the moment. The choice that would determine everything that came next. She could walk away, keep running, hope that eventually Blake would give up or make a mistake. Or she could stand and fight. She thought about the last 3 years. The fear, the isolation, the constant looking over her shoulder. And she thought about all those other victims in Rita's photos, people whose lives Blake had destroyed. Okay, Claire said finally. Tell me the plan. Rita took Claire to a secure FBI office in Lower Manhattan. It wasn't the main building, just a small office space that looked like it could belong to any business. But inside, past the locked doors and security cameras, there was a conference room with walls covered in documents, photos, and charts. This is everything we have on Blake's operation, Rita said, gesturing to the walls. I want you to see it all. You deserve to know what you're really dealing with. Claire stood in the middle of the room and slowly turned, taking it all in. There were photographs of crime scenes with notes scribbled in the margins, bank statements showing large cash deposits, surveillance photos of Blake meeting with men Claire didn't recognize, phone records, text messages, a web of connections drawn between names and dates and locations. We started investigating about a year ago, Rita explained, standing beside her. A defense attorney noticed something strange. 3 of her clients had been arrested by Blake's task force, and all 3 cases had evidence that didn't add up. Drugs found in places that didn't make sense. Witnesses who changed their stories. She brought it to us and we started digging. Rita walked to one section of the wall and pointed to a timeline. What we found was a pattern going back at least 5 years. Blake and his team would target specific people. Sometimes they were actual criminals, but sometimes they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They would plant evidence, falsify reports, and make arrests that looked good on paper. Why? Claire asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Money. Power. Blake's task force got funding based on their arrest numbers. The better their stat, the more resources they got, but that was just the beginning. Rita moved to another section showing financial records. Some of the people they arrested were connected to criminal organizations, drug dealers, money launderers, and Blake would make them deals, pay him to look the other way, and he'd lose evidence or mess up the paperwork so cases got dismissed. Claire felt sick. She thought about all those dinner parties, all those times Blake had come home talking about the important work he was doing, the dangerous criminals he was putting away. She had believed him. She had been proud of him. How many people? She asked quietly. We've identified at least 23 cases that we're certain were manipulated. But we think there are more. A lot more. Rita's voice was gentle but firm. Claire, your ex-husband destroyed lives. People went to prison for crimes they didn't commit. Actual criminals walked free to hurt more people. And he made a fortune doing it. The room felt too small suddenly. Claire sat down in one of the chairs, her legs shaky. And you think the evidence is in that storage unit. We know Blake had records. He's too smart not to keep insurance. If his partners ever turned on him, he'd need proof of their involvement too. Some kind of leverage. Rita sat across from her. When you disappeared, Blake tore apart your shared apartment looking for something. His behavior made it clear he'd lost control of important evidence. We think that's what's in the box you took. I didn't even know, Claire whispered. I just grabbed it because I thought it had my old tax documents in it. I know, but now that box is the key to everything. Without it, we have suspicions and circumstantial evidence. With it, we might have enough to bring down Blake and everyone working with him. Claire looked up at the walls again, at all those photos and documents. How many people are involved? At least 6 officers in Blake's task force. Maybe more. And we're not sure how high up the chain it goes. Blake has been protected by someone with influence. Every time we got close to something concrete, files would disappear or witnesses would recant. Someone's been running interference. So even if we get the evidence, Blake might not go down alone. That's what we're hoping for. The bigger the network, the more people we can stop. Rita pulled out a tablet and opened a map. Now let's talk about the storage unit. It's in Queens under your old name. Blake almost certainly has someone watching it, probably 24/7. He's been waiting for you to go there. Claire studied the map. The storage facility was in an industrial area, surrounded by warehouses and parking lots. Not many places to hide. If I go there, he'll know immediately. That's actually part of the plan. We want him to know. What? Rita zoomed in on the map showing the surrounding streets and buildings. We'll have agents positioned here, here, and here. Surveillance on every approach. We'll control the situation completely. You go in, get the box, and come out. If Blake or his people try to approach you, we'll be there. You're using me as bait, Claire said. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Yes, Rita admitted, but you'll be protected every second. I promise you that. Claire thought about it. She thought about Blake and his careful plans, his patient way of waiting for the perfect moment. He won't fall for it. Blake's too smart. If he sees me go to the storage unit after all this time, after weeks of hiding, he'll know something's wrong. Maybe, but he's also desperate. He needs that evidence back, and you're his only way to get it. Even if he suspects it's a trap, he might take the risk. And if he doesn't? If he just watches and waits? Rita leaned back in her chair. Then we get the evidence anyway, and we build our case. It won't be as clean as catching him in the act, but we'll still have what we need. Claire stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city was going about its business. People rushing to meetings, grabbing lunch, living their normal lives. She had wanted that so badly. Just a normal life without fear. When would we do this? She asked. As soon as possible. The longer we wait, the more time Blake has to figure out what we're doing. I'm thinking this Saturday. Morning when there's good light and plenty of witnesses around. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to get ready to face the man who had haunted her for 3 years. Claire, Rita said softly, I need you to understand something. This is dangerous. Even with all our precautions, Blake is unpredictable. If you have any doubts, we can find another way. Claire turned from the window. What other way? I can get a warrant for the storage unit. It'll take time, maybe a few weeks to push through all the legal channels, but... A few weeks? Claire interrupted. Rita, I've been running for 3 years. I've been living in safe houses for 2 weeks, barely sleeping, always looking over my shoulder. I can't do this for a few more weeks. I won't make it, Rita nodded slowly, understanding in her eyes. Then we do it Saturday. They spent the next hour going over every detail, the timing, the route Claire would take, what she should do if Blake approached her, what the FBI agents would be wearing so she could identify them. Rita showed her photos of Blake's known associates, making sure Claire could recognize them. They planned for every scenario they could think of. Finally, Rita walked Claire to the door. You're incredibly brave, she said. Most people would have kept running. Claire shook her head. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared. That's the same thing sometimes. Claire went back to the safe house and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut off. She kept thinking about those walls covered in evidence, all those lives Blake had destroyed. She thought about the box sitting in that storage unit, gathering dust while she built a new life. She called Catherine that evening and told her everything. Catherine was quiet for a long time after Claire finished. "Are you sure about this?" Catherine finally asked. "No," Claire admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway. Then I'm going to be there. Not at the storage unit, but nearby. I'll have my phone, and if anything goes wrong, Catherine, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You asked for my help 3 years ago and I gave you legal advice. Now I'm giving you something more important. Support. You're not doing this alone, Claire." Claire felt tears sting her eyes. She hadn't cried in months, maybe years. She had trained herself not to, because crying meant weakness and weakness meant Blake won. But Catherine's words broke something open inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, Claire did something she hadn't done since leaving Phoenix. She took out an old photo album from the bottom of her bag. There were pictures of her before Blake, before the fear and the isolation. She looked happy in those photos, young and hopeful and completely unaware of what was coming. She studied her own face in those pictures and made a promise to that younger version of herself. She would get that life back. Not the exact same life, maybe, but the feeling of it, the freedom of it. Saturday morning came cold and clear. Claire got dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were easy to move in just in case she needed to run. She braided her hair back. She checked and rechecked the address Rita had given her for meeting points if things went wrong. Rita called at 7. "We're in position. Everything looks clear. Are you ready?" Claire looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She barely recognized the woman looking back. 3 years ago, she had run away in the middle of the night, terrified and broken. Now she was walking straight toward the danger. "I'm ready," she said. And for the first time in 3 years, she actually meant it. The storage facility looked exactly as Claire remembered it, a sprawling complex of orange metal units stretching across 2 city blocks, surrounded by a chain-link fence. She had chosen this place 3 years ago because it was cheap and anonymous. Now, standing across the street with her heart pounding, it felt like walking back into a nightmare. Rita's voice came through the small earpiece hidden beneath Claire's hair. "We see you. Teams are in position. You're safe." Claire took a deep breath and crossed the street. The morning sun was bright and there were other people around. A man loading furniture into a moving truck. A woman on her phone walking toward the office. Normal Saturday morning activities. It was almost strange to think that her entire world was about to change while everyone else just went about their day. She punched in the code at the gate, and it buzzed open. Her unit was toward the back, number 247. She had chosen it specifically because it was in a corner, away from the main pathways. Back then, she had wanted privacy. Now she realized it meant fewer witnesses. The surveillance had to be here. Blake's people watching and waiting. Claire forced herself not to look around for them, not to act suspicious. She just walked like someone coming to get a few old boxes, nothing more. Unit 247 had a blue door with a combination lock. Claire's hands shook as she spun the numbers. She had to try twice before she got it right. The lock clicked open and she pulled up the metal door. It screeched loudly in the quiet morning air. Inside, everything was just as she had left it. 3 cardboard boxes, a broken lamp she had meant to fix, a bag of old clothes. The box she needed was in the back corner, marked with a black X she had drawn without thinking. She had marked all her boxes that way, just random symbols that meant nothing. But now that X felt significant, like it had been waiting for this moment. Claire stepped inside and reached for the box. It was heavier than she remembered. She pulled it toward her and opened the flaps carefully. Inside were papers, files, a few USB drives, and an old tablet. She didn't have time to look through it all. Rita had been clear. "Get in, get the box, get out." "I have it," she said quietly, knowing Rita could hear her through the earpiece. "Good. Bring it out slowly. Stay calm." Claire picked up the box and turned toward the door. Blake was standing there. Her ex-husband looked almost exactly as she remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair just starting to gray at the temples. He was wearing casual clothes, jeans and a jacket, not his uniform. But he had that same expression she knew too well, cold, calculating, in control. "Hello, Claire," he said. His voice was calm, like they were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. Claire's entire body went rigid. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to drop the box and bolt. But there was nowhere to go. Blake was blocking the only exit. 3 years. Blake continued, taking a step closer. 3 years you made me look for you. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused me? Claire found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. Stay back. Blake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on now. We both know how this ends. You're going to give me that box, and then we're going to have a conversation about what happens next. I'm not giving you anything. Yes, you are. Blake's voice hardened. Because if you don't, things are going to get very difficult for you. You're still my wife legally. Did you know that? The divorce was never finalized, which means I have rights, access to your records, your bank accounts, your new life. Claire's mind was racing. Rita had said the FBI was watching. Where were they? Why weren't they moving in? Blake took another step. That box contains things that belong to me. Private property. You took it without permission, which makes you a thief. Now we can handle this the easy way, where you give it back and we both walk away. Or we can handle it the hard way. The FBI is here, Claire said, the words tumbling out. They're watching right now. You can't do anything to me. For just a second, Blake's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. Then the smile came back. The FBI, of course. You always did make things more complicated than they needed to be. He looked around casually, as if noticing the storage facility for the first time. I don't see any FBI agents, do you? I see a parking lot and some storage units. I see my ex-wife holding a box that belongs to me. He turned back to Claire. But sure, let's say they are here. Let's say they're watching. What exactly do you think they're waiting for? For you to try something, Claire said. For you to threaten me or touch me. They're building a case against you, Blake. They know everything. Blake laughed, and the sound made Claire's skin crawl. A case based on what? Some files I kept at home? Claire, you don't understand how any of this works. I have lawyers. I have connections. I have people who owe me favors reaching all the way to the top. Whatever you think you have in that box, it won't be enough. It will be, Claire said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice sounded now. Because I'm not alone anymore. And I'm not afraid of you. Blake's smile vanished. His face went cold and hard. You should be. He reached for her arm and everything happened at once. FBI. Don't move. Rita's voice rang out across the parking lot. Blake froze, his hand inches from Claire's arm. FBI agents in tactical gear emerged from behind vehicles and from around corners. There had to be at least a dozen of them, all with weapons drawn, all focused on Blake. Rita stepped forward, her badge held high. Blake Thornton, you're under arrest. Put your hands where I can see them. For a moment, Blake just stood there. Claire watched as the reality of the situation settled over him. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape route, but there wasn't one. He was surrounded. Then he looked back at Claire, and she saw real emotion in his face for the first time. Not anger or control, but something else. Disbelief. Like he couldn't understand how she had beaten him. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. Yes, I do, Claire replied. I stopped you. 2 agents moved in and secured Blake's hands behind his back. They read him his rights while he stared at Claire, his jaw tight. She held his gaze and didn't look away. Not this time. Not ever again. Rita appeared beside Claire and gently took the box from her hands. Are you okay? Claire nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She watched as they led Blake toward a waiting vehicle. Other agents were moving in now, securing the scene, taking photos, documenting everything. Wilson appeared from somewhere, his hands already secured. He had been here too, watching. Now he was being led to a different vehicle, his face carefully blank. We got them, Rita said. The whole team. They were all here waiting for you to show up. They walked right into it. Claire sat down on the curb, her legs suddenly shaky. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright was fading, leaving her exhausted and overwhelmed. Rita sat beside her. You were incredibly brave, Rita said. I was terrified, Claire admitted. That's what makes it brave. They sat there while the FBI processed the scene around them. Catherine appeared at some point, having been waiting nearby just as she promised. She sat on Claire's other side and took her hand. It's over, Catherine said softly. It's really over. Claire watched as the vehicle carrying Blake pulled away. She thought about the last 3 years. All that running, all that fear, All those nights lying awake wondering if she would ever be free. And now in one morning it was done. 6 months later, Claire sat in a courtroom and watched Blake being sentenced. The evidence from the box had been even more damaging than Rita hoped. Bank records showing payoffs, detailed notes about planted evidence, communications with criminal organizations. Combined with the FBI's investigation, it was overwhelming. Blake got 15 years. Wilson got 12. 4 other members of the task force received various sentences, and 2 high-ranking officials who had been covering for them were forced to resign. Rita was right. It went deeper than anyone had known. After the trial, Claire stood outside the courthouse with Catherine and Rita. The sun was shining, and the city was alive with noise and movement. "What will you do now?" Rita asked. Claire thought about it. She had her real name back now. The restraining order was permanent. Blake couldn't touch her anymore, and even if he got out early, she wouldn't be afraid. She had proven to herself that she could face him and win. "I think I'll start over," Claire said. For real this time. Not hiding, just living. She had already started. She was running a support group for other survivors of domestic abuse, particularly those whose abusers had positions of power. She was using everything she had learned, all that fear and pain, to help others find their way to safety. Rita had become a friend. Catherine had become more than just a lawyer. Claire was building a real life, not just a safe one. As she walked away from the courthouse that day, Claire thought about that moment in the subway station 3 years ago. The moment she had seen Wilson's face in the crowd and known she wasn't safe. That moment had terrified her, but it had also saved her, because it forced her to stop running and start fighting. Now, walking down the courthouse steps with friends beside her and her future ahead of her, Claire finally understood something. She had never been alone. Not really. There had always been people willing to help, to fight for her, to stand beside her. She just had to be brave enough to let them, and she was.